Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Our next speaker is going to be Nicolle Ellis. She received a BA in International Studies at American University and a law degree from UT Austin. She has experience working as an immigration attorney and is currently involved with PAIR, the Partnership for the Advancement and Immersion of Refugees. Today, she'll be presenting on the adjustment process for local refugee youth after resettlement. Please welcome Ms. Ellis.
Hi everyone. I'm always excited when I get to go out to different community events and forums and tell more people about our work who might not be used to what we're doing. And the medical community is really so important for refugees, so I'm really glad I got the opportunity to come here today. As my introducer said, my name is Nicolle Ellis, and I am the director of this nonprofit organization. What I'm going to do, instead of going directly into the challenges I see and trying to describe to you what this process is like for our students, I'm just going to show you two very short videos so you can hear it from themselves. When the organizers did contact me to speak today, I made clear that they understood that our mission isn't actually focused on health specifically. We're focused on refugee youth, their adjustment, their academic progress, and their success, their ultimate success in the United States. But we found, as we designed our programs and as we were trying to focus just on academics, that the social aspect of what we could do for them was really so important. The medical issues, mental health issues that were coming up were really essential to address. You can't expect somebody who's just seen a lot of trauma and come to this country and endured a lot to just go straight into English testing and academic tutoring. So what I'm going to do first, like I mentioned, is play one video. Let's see, where did my... Okay, so I'm going to play the first video, which is a little sad, and it talks about our students going through their difficulties. And then I'm going to play a really short follow-up video, which talks about what our programs do and how we help them. And then we can go into some of the specifics of the specific health issues that our students go through.
I spent 2 years in Malaysia, and it was a really hard time there because we are afraid of police all the time. We don't eat meal at all, like once a month or like that. But right here, we eat like everyday meal. So it's awesome.
We lived in refugee camps. They distribute some foods for 15 days, and after 15 days, they distribute again.
I don't feel comfortable with all the African Americans. They always have this hate in their heart, and that really makes me sad. But they always think that when we're talking about them. I don't have this time. We had to tell them sometimes that we're not from here, and then we don't understand what they're saying.
50% of the chance if I was in Africa, I wouldn't be in school. I came here so I can make a better me to make a difference in the world.
To say, oh, you're not from here, and even asking stupid questions like, do you have a chair in your country? Which really doesn't make any sense.
Nepali people or international kids, they get beaten up by the other American students. They don't understand us. We don't speak English good, but we know our work. My home was made of bamboos. Our walls, they were made of half bamboo and half mud. We had to repair them once a year because it's not really strong.
It was miserable because now there was no electricity, there was no good supply of water. This country is totally new. We are learning how to earn our living in this country, and we are overcoming.
The language. That's what most of us have a problem with, to learn how to speak the language.
English is a very difficult language. It's a difficult language for people who are native born. What's an example of a person? Wait, good. Wait, raise your hand, raise your hand. A lot of their parents aren't educated, they've never had formal schooling, and even if they have, it's so vastly different. Joseph, what's another example of a thing? Like
Paper?
paper? Yep, paper.
First time I can't understand what they are saying, but right now I was like doing really great now.
Their lives, literally their lives, depend on being able to communicate. And these students are sort of the lifeline to their families.
But right here, if we work hard, our work hard really pay off.
And they're very willing, I've found, to put the effort in because they've been through so much.
They're much more mature than the other students around them, and you can tell they appreciate things a lot more, like free public education.
Because back in Africa, in high schools, you have to pay for a high school. And the teachers that I went through to be here, they were there to guide me each and every step for me, to help me learn more, to help me be more than I was.
Being an advocate, first and foremost, means being aware, knowing your students and where they've come from, where they've been.
You need to be patient and flexible.
Pay more attention to the kids who like to isolate themselves. Because maybe they're scared of something, maybe they're scared the answer is not right.
And they should go slowly, not always going so fast and not getting mad at students.
Google the name of their country, Google problems, Google, refugee camps, Google refugee, and, try to spend even 10 minutes getting an idea of where they come from.
They're not going to announce that. They're not going to walk into a classroom with a sign that says, hey, I've been through a horrible experience and here's my life story. It's going to take being proactive to get to know that.
Try and understand that we need a little bit more time to catch up than other students do.
But it's not to the point where you should be condescending or pity or have lower expectations.
It does take extra steps and it does take a little bit of effort, but it's so worth it.
I wish one day I would go back to my country and see what it looks like. And maybe I could help others too.
Okay, so this video was a video made of Westbury High School this year. It was made by HISD's multilingual department as a teacher training tool for new teachers who come in and who work with immigrant and refugee students in the schools, just about what they might need. So Westbury High School is one of 2 HISD high schools which have the highest refugee concentration in the city. They have both approximately 100 refugee students just in a regular American high school. So this video, it's actually much shorter than the first one. This was made actually by the Jeremy Lin Foundation, and it featured 3 nonprofits, and PAIR was one of them. And we were selected to, Houston Rockets player Jeremy Lin, we were selected to receive support from him this year. And so he wanted the public to get to know these nonprofits and what we do.
My name is Fatma Sisse.
My name is Chandra.
My name is Justin.
My name is Cole.
And my family is from Bhutan.
I'm from Nigeria.
From Rwanda.
And my parents are from Sierra Leone.
A refugee is a person who faces persecution in another country, and they've been allowed to come to the United States to flee that persecution. So many of our students face difficulty adjusting to a new culture because of the long journey they've made from refugee camps.
Well, first when I came, it was not easy. I was like, hey, I cannot do this, you know, and then I got to PAIR.
PAIR has 3 different programs for middle school and high school youth in the Houston community at various sites. We've improved their English skills, and we've educated them about higher education options.
And we take a holistic approach. We do mentoring and tutoring to help them become future leaders and prepare the students for life.
I thought it was only me struggling, but I mean, when I went to PAIR, I met a lot of people, and every single one of them is going through something, but they're all trying to go somewhere and be somebody. So that motivated me. I was like, hey, if they can do it, why can't I? If it wasn't for PAIR, I would probably not have any friends at all. I wouldn't have another people to call a family. I wouldn't have other people to look up to, people to motivate me. We are a family because, you know, they're all there to make you a better you.
Thank you for watching the video. Please vote for your favorite organization.
You don't have to vote, it's already done. We won. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so just to give me a little bit of context, who is familiar with refugees in this room? Okay. Can you guys just maybe tell me what context you've interacted with them or know about them?
Well, it's maybe an outdated statistic, but I think there's something like the way language is spoken in the Chinese schools.
Yeah.
It's just quite, I think it's a statistic that most Houstonians simply are not familiar.
Right. Yeah, most people are not familiar with a refugee at all, and so what I usually do is just start by kind of explaining what it means. I know, for example, Maria Trujillo spoke earlier, and she works with victims of trafficking, and so, you know, they all need the same services. But what a refugee is it's a person who actually was pre-approved to come to the United States because of certain grounds, and those grounds are they're facing persecution in their home country on account of race, religion, nationality, political opinion. It's a little bit different sometimes. If the difference between a refugee and asylee is an asylee has gotten here on their own, and then they decide once they get here to actually apply to be able to stay based on these same grounds. But they may not have come here legally, or they may have come here legally and now they want to stay. They've either self-identified and they're applying for asylum, or they're at risk of being deported and then they're applying for asylum. But refugees are a little bit different in our city just because they've gone through a formal process. They have received some services to get here, and they're concentrated in certain neighborhoods in the city because the nonprofit resettlement agencies that put them in the city select the neighborhoods where they can afford the housing and where they're going to service them. So the refugees tend to be grouped together in certain neighborhoods until they end up moving, and sometimes they move within, it kind of depends on the family or the culture, and sometimes they move within 6 months, and then sometimes they're staying in the same apartment complex for 3 years. So you may not have, you may have certain neighborhood where refugee resettlement was really active a few years ago, but there's still a lot of refugees in that neighborhood, and I have those listed here as well. So because of all the difficulties for someone who is from these foreign countries, because of all the difficulties they would encounter when they get here, the UN actually doesn't prefer resettlement to a place like the United States as their first choice. So the first choice is, of course, that the violence will stop and they'll not be forced to leave their country, because they don't really want to leave their country in most cases. The second option is that if they've fled to a neighboring country, if that neighboring country will let them stay, that also can be better because there might be people in that country who speak the same language and there might not be as much of a culture difference and they might have a better chance for getting jobs. So if none of those options work, then the UN does reserve a certain number of refugees that it'll accept each year because certain countries like the United States have agreed to take a certain number in. So the U.S. is one of those that takes in a large percentage of the world's refugees. The level gets set every year by the State Department and the President. And I think this year it might be like 70 or 75, but it was a little higher a couple years ago. So this actually, this slide is up to date now. So last year, Texas actually received the largest number of refugees of any state in the country. And Harris County received the largest number of any one. I mean, I guess if you combine Dallas and Fort Worth, it's about the same, but Harris County itself received the largest number of refugees in Texas. So what's important to remember is that they do get initial services when they come here, but then after that, it's really easy for them to fall off the grid and to fall kind of out of sight. You know, they may have been explained their rights, you know, their eligibility for public services. They may have been told, you know, there's a caseworker that can continue helping you if you need it, but they may not really understand that. They may have, you know, lost that number. They may not know that they can ask for help. And so past a certain point, nobody's really checking in with them to make sure that they're okay. There might be community groups doing that, but as far as the agencies that initially put them in the housing, you know, they're very swamped. You know, they do a good job, you know, it's just they only have the limited resources that the government has given them to provide the initial core services of placing them in the housing, helping them find a job, and trying to work on their English with them. So that's why a lot of people are really involved in outreach to refugees in the complexes that they live in the city. So just, I'm not, you know, our organization is not specifically focused on health, although it does come up. So I'm not going to, you know, give you super detailed explanation of the health services, but I can tell you that that all refugees, just like other permanent immigrants to the United States, do receive a medical exam before coming into the United States. So if they need vaccines, they'll get vaccines. There's certain diseases like leprosy or certain sexually transmitted diseases that may, AIDS, that may prohibit them from actually being allowed in. But for the most part, if it's a treatable thing, then they can come in and they can get treated for it once they get here. There are some waivers for diseases that are prohibitive diseases for entering the country, but I think those are pretty hard to get. So they do get that screening and they get approved, and then they come here, and then the Harris County Health Department has a refugee screening program. And so within 90 days, 30 days is preferable and 90 days is the latest, the agency that is actually helping them once they get here, like Catholic Charities, Interfaith Ministries, and a couple others, they're supposed to facilitate going into a clinic, and which is paid for them to get a follow-up, for them to get their remaining vaccines, or if there seems to be an issue, to be referred to more medical services here. They have paperwork and documentation of whatever their initial medical assessment was abroad, and then they're supposed to bring that to the person in the clinic who's doing the refugee health screening, and that they can follow it up. If they don't have that paperwork, they're going to revaccinate them. So that's a big issue. So basically, what you said in the back, it's interesting because there's been a trend in refugee resettlement over time. So although we had large numbers of refugees coming in the past, they were typically from a small number of countries, and there was also more money allocated to them. So now there's only 6 months of support of the kind of apartment assistance and so forth. And in previous years, it could be up to 2 or 3 years, and that's like 20 years ago. But we used to let in refugees from Vietnam, the former Soviet Union, from Yugoslavia. A lot of times these were people coming from developed countries that had to adjust but might not have been harder because they already had a higher level of education, or they were coming where so many people of them were coming at the same time, or they had a community here that could relate to them or spoke the same language. It's kind of like right now we also have Cuban refugees, but our Cuban refugees typically, we never see any in our programs because they get placed in a different area where there are Spanish speakers and they typically don't need as much help for these services. So the U.S. made a concerted effort to diversify its refugee resettlement program to take in mind conflicts all over the world. And that is great, but it also made the service environment pretty difficult because there are so many languages spoken and translation is a huge issue. And it really depends on where people are coming from, whether you could kind of get by going to the apartments on your own and like having a community member translate for you, or perhaps the kids translate for you. Maybe that'll work in some communities, and then like with our Burmese community, I can almost never talk to anybody. If I'm walking around an apartment complex trying to talk to Burmese families, I really need to have prearranged to have somebody, a translator, come with me in order to speak to the families. So I'm not going to quite go through all these. Because this conference is about collaboration, I do want to make you guys aware of different agencies in the Houston area which work with refugees. So the biggest agencies that work with refugees are Catholic Charities, Interfaith Ministries, Alliance for Multicultural Community Services, YMCA International Services, and then Refugee Services of Texas is a really small agency. But all these agencies, they all do the primary work of greeting the refugee at the airport, taking them to their apartment complex, giving them their key, keeping track of them with the case manager to make sure they get a job within 6 months. The agencies are actually, their funding and their continued funding is graded on whether they get the parents a job. So I think they have to hit an 85% employment standard in order to keep reselling these agencies. A lot of times, obviously, they're very low income jobs and ones where you don't need a lot of English. A lot of the family members work 2 jobs. But these are the agencies that they are very overstretched, in terms of their funding. So, if they're not able to do something for you, it's not necessarily because they don't want to, it's just because all their resources are being used with basic services. But they're also good to collaborate with because they have a lot of background information on the refugees. They have the file, of exactly what the family did, what the interview before they came to the United States, abroad, what their skills are. So anytime somebody calls us and wants to do something really specific that doesn't fit into our mission statement or that's, not really appropriate for us, instead of going into an area where we know nothing about, we say, well, let's collaborate with one of these bigger agencies to see if we can all come together and make this happen. And we don't want to duplicate services. So there's also lots of religious groups in Houston, like church groups that go out and do little tutoring programs or do, try to help with the refugee population in Houston. PAIR focuses specifically on refugee youth. We have, as the video said, we have programs at 5 different sites, middle schools, high school, and community centers. And, we're always hoping to expand because we're not in all the middle schools or high schools that refugees are. We try to target the ones that have the highest number of refugees. So this is just about what those big agencies are really responsible to do. It's the basics right here. So they do have some small programs outside of initial resettlement, but basically they're going to be focused on initial resettlement. And refugees do have access to case management services for 5 years, but they often don't know that. So if it's 3 years later after they got here and they haven't had any contact with their agency at all, they're actually able to call up any agency in town and say, I'm having this issue, can you help me with it? So, that's definitely something that if you have a refugee in a hospital or, if you run into a refugee in some circumstance, you can always ask them, like, who brought you here, if they can remember, you can try to get at it that way. So I know for the schools, there are outreach workers in HISD that actually help. They have access to translators and they can come to the school and talk to the kids about various issues. Okay, So this is just a quick snapshot of the refugee population in Houston. So this was a couple years ago, but it's still pretty accurate today. The only difference is that you'll notice that the Congo, 5% of the refugee groups were coming from the Congo. And that's actually going to be the next big wave of refugees coming in. So the number from Congo is going to shoot up. And a lot of those folks have experienced and witnessed violence. And I also heard that about 75% of the people coming are going to be under 25 from the Congo. So these countries that are the major countries here, they'll shift over time as the U.S. gets finished resettling all the people from a particular country that want to be resettled. So example, for now, I heard at the last Refugee Consortium meeting that the U.S. is almost done resettling the people that are refugees from Burma that are living in Thai refugee camps along the Burma-Thai border. But then there's still, because even though there's still refugees there, the ones that are there don't want to come, or they've already asked all the ones there. So, but there's still going to be Burmese coming in from Malaysia. So there's some Burmese that fled and went to Thailand, some that went to Malaysia. So it'll shift, and maybe they'll resettle eventually all those people who want to be resettled. So as far as where the refugees are in the city, they're in actually kind of 5 basic neighborhoods right now. And actually, I didn't put all the schools in A-Leaf, but so Fondren Southwest is kind of at Fondren and West Belfort. I don't know if y'all are familiar with that. And then Gulfton is at 59 and Bel Air. So those 2 places in HIC have the highest number of refugees in the middle school and the highest number of refugees in their high school. Those are the top schools in middle schools and high schools of the entire HISD system. So we actually have an after-school program at Fondren, an after-school program at Las Americas, an after-school program at Westbury, and we work with Lee High School, but we don't have an official program there right now. In A-Leaf, A-Leaf is a little bit different. It's Budwig Intermediate School, O'Donnell, Elsick High School, and their system is a little bit weird of how they put kids in middle school and high school, but that's where they are. And then the newest area is West Chase, Paul Revere Middle School and Westside High School. And then a lot of the refugees, particularly the African refugees, end up moving downtown because there's subsidized housing there. And they can't go there initially. The agencies aren't allowed to put them there initially, but then they can end up going there. So our refugees are concentrated from those countries I mentioned, but they come from all over the world. And our programs are designed to help them adjust to the United States, help them elevate their academics so that they can ultimately graduate, and they're focused on future planning, resumes, getting into technical school or high school, or 2-year or 4-year school, and just becoming members of the community, feeling a sense of community here in the United States. I'm going pretty quickly through PAIRS programs just because I know I don't have that much time yet left. So you already saw the video of the students, but I'm not going to go in detail through these, but I have a booklet which with pictures and which has stories of each of these students listed here. And just to give you an idea of the things that our students have gone through, K-Ray was a student we had from Burma whose father had been killed in fighting in Burma. And his family had actually lived in refugee camps for 24 years. So he'd been born in a refugee camp and never lived anywhere else. So he only had his mom here and his 3 older brothers. And his mom had to go out of town for work every week. So she actually only saw him once a week. And that's often the case with a lot of our students. The parents aren't there, or they work odd hours and different schedules. So it's hard for them to catch things that might be wrong with the students or to help them and take them places. Amira was a student we had from Iraq. Her father was a translator for the US government, and he ended up being targeted and feared assassination. He even had like a picture taken with General Petraeus when he was giving him an award, and so he ended up having to flee Iraq. Ibrahim, he was from Sudan. I actually don't know, I'd have to have the booklet open to know his story because I don't know him as well. Prashant is from Bhutan. a lot of times too, the clients will tell you that they're from a certain country. Like a lot of the kids, they identify with the country they went to. Like I'm saying he's from Bhutan, but really he lived and grew up in Nepal his whole life. Same thing with the child from Burma. He would have told you he was from Thailand. So, you know, that information might be difficult. Same with their names. Sometimes they tell you one name, first and last names can be confusing. Serenity, that was a girl we had in our program from Rwanda. She had experienced sexual assault in Africa, and she also had gone through things that most kids will never have to go through, like being the oldest sibling. She had to go collect firewood every day, you know, out and, you know, walk miles and miles, and that's how she ended up being vulnerable. And Aaliyah is from Somalia, and she's, I think, one of 7 kids in her family. So this is actually pulled from a mentoring handbook. So this is kind of the official challenges and assets of refugee youth. And then I have my next slide is things that we've actually seen in our programs. So I only have 2 minutes left before I wanted to take questions. So I'll go through this one pretty quickly. The challenges are obviously separation. They've left a lot of family behind. Family may have perished. When they get here, their parents may work odd hours. Their adjustment, their trauma, poverty, discrimination, intergenerational conflict, they may adapt faster than their parents, but of course they have lots of strengths that they're bringing here as well if they end up succeeding and that can help them succeed. Okay, so here's some issues that have happened in our program. So we had a student, we were working with the high school and looking at all the kids who were truant, and we're talking seriously truant, like missing 30 more days of school. And my program manager looked at the list, and then she also compared to a list of all the kids who had actually passed the TAKS test to exit high school, which is not that many of the refugee students, and the girl had passed the TAKS, but yet she wasn't going to graduate because she was 30 days truant. We found out she just needed glasses. She was able to pass the TAKS because she was nearsighted, but she couldn't see the board, so she stopped coming to school. We had a student in need of a polio vaccine, and the nurse kept sending notes home to his parents, and nobody responded. And so the nurse came to us because she knew we did apartment outreach and said, can you please help get this child a polio vaccine, because otherwise they're not going to be allowed back in school. Strangely enough, the menstrual cycles of our girls, sometimes it really affects them, and they don't know about access to Tylenol and Midol and stuff, and they just always miss school when they have their menstrual cycle. Hygiene, they may not fit in with the other students. They may not know what the standards are here, and they may get made fun of for it. We also are having an issue right now where a lot of our students we've just seen all these students with warts in the apartment complex, and so we're trying to figure out what's going on and refer them somewhere because it just popped up and they all have warts. We have students with disabilities that have had significant trauma. We're not sure if it's actual learning disabilities or it's just kind of trauma from what they've gone through. And if they're not addressed, we tried to get them appointments. One family, it's really sad, they just ended up in really bad circumstances. One went to jail and one was pregnant because we never could get them the mental health services they needed. One of our students told one of his mentors that he wanted to be a soldier and return to his country and avenge his parents' death. So obviously he needed some mental health help. We have certain students with anxiety or depression. And then of course they're always susceptible, like all other Americans, to getting into drugs and alcohol, and they are not put in very nice neighborhoods. So in our programming, how we've responded, as opposed to just being an academic program, we have a program for brand new students. We make sure we have guest speakers on nutrition, hygiene, public safety. We've taken our students to Baylor, and the med students have volunteered and made them smoothies and talked about nutrition. We've made sure we've had outlets to deal with their stress, bullying, peer pressure, talking about relationship, sharing about their own cultures and being proud of that. And then my long-term, what I think this is so great about this conference is I think, communication between all the relevant parties and providers and everybody knowing where the resources are could be really useful for our community to help overcome these challenges, to have a better network of providers for referrals. And also it would be really nice if we could have a list of volunteers for special circumstances. We have volunteers who want to be translators but say, I don't have anybody I can call up right now if I say, oh, all the kids at this one apartment complex have warts. So I would like to know if anybody in the audience can tell me how that works, because one person, med's resident, told me like, oh, we can't ever, we can't go out and look at the apartment. That's Medicare fraud or something like that. And so I would just be nice to know, like, if there's some sort of service without actually treating them or jeopardizing your medical license, where people who might, you can just call up, not even maybe to treat or to see someone, but say, well, you should go there, you know, just to give us advice when we run into these things. So if you want to stay in touch with us, these are our online access points, and you can get in touch with us. Emails and phone numbers are up on the web. And I don't know how much time I have, but does anybody have any questions? 3 minutes. Okay. Yes.
I'm a provider at People's. I think you know
Are you on HighStar?
Tarnif.
Tarnif. Okay. Great.
My question is, I actually see a lot of adults and parents in this program.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see the mental and physical problems that the parents carry to children?
I guess, you know, so I don't know, since we don't get to know the parents as well. The only thing I can tell you is that when the parents are struggling more, the children have to take over more of the role for the parents. So we see a lot of kids that can't come to our program because they have to take care of younger siblings, or they get pressured to provide for the family if the parents can't. I also see, just regarding our parent outreach and involvement efforts, that it just seems like the parents, you know, the kids that aren't as successful, their parents aren't as involved. And it may not be the parents' fault, but they may be dealing with their own problems. Or we found out that these one parents were mute, and it was just like we were going around to all the houses saying, your kid's on the truant list. Like, why aren't they coming to school? Do you care? And we were talking to the parents of the kids who are really good and make great grades, and they're saying, those parents, you know, like, you're wasting your time. Like, you've already contacted with everybody. You've already done your job at, like, telling everybody how important it is. They've got bigger problems that they're trying to worry about. So I guess I kind of see the problems trickling down like that. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm curious, and you may have gone into this a little bit, I'm sorry if I missed it. I'm curious how you guys do outreach with, like, teachers and people who are in the school.
So if we're already in a school, it's fairly easy, because since we are school-based, it's great that we're not in apartments and we have to figure out, you know, where they go to school. So we're school-based at Westbury, Fondren, and Las Americas. And so at those schools, we have really good relationships with the ELL coordinators and the English teachers and the counselors, if they exist. Yeah. Sometimes they're not counselors at the schools. Yes.
I was recently doing some reading, and I don't know anything about it. It just kind of came across my radar. The unaccompanied
Refugee minors. So those are orphans, so all of our students have been resettled with their families, and then there's a few agencies across the United States which have a program to take in unaccompanied refugee minors. So Catholic Charities in Houston, typically, I know, like, last time I talked to them, they had 25 in their custody. They may have 50 or 75. And those are kids that they might be refugees, or they might have been, asylees, or they might have been detained, and they actually get put with foster parents. Yeah. Well, our goal is to try to have a middle school and a high school where they're living, so that we can follow them through the end of when they're in high school, but sometimes they move sooner. So I've been told my time is out. So thank you for coming and listening.